Hello, welcome to our worship facility webinar, Microphone Secrets for the Worship Stage, Golden Presciado, audio expert for QSC. Golden, why don't you get us started?
Hey there, I'm Golden Presciado, and welcome to my audio training session, Microphone Secrets for the Worship Stage. However, my hope is that by the end of this session, you will find nothing secret about microphones and their use on the worship stage. So, let's get started. There are two primary types of microphones, dynamic mics and condenser mics. A dynamic mic can withstand high sound pressure levels, or SPLs as is often abbreviated, without distorting. So these types of mics are great for kick drums, snare drums, guitar amps, and they sound good on vocals as well. Dynamic mics are fairly rugged and able to withstand some of the abuse that comes with the live sound environment, like lead singers using the mic as a drumstick. There are different varieties of dynamic mics available, some designed for use with instruments and others specifically designed for use with vocals. Dynamic microphones are very common in stage performances of all kinds. Our second type of mic is the condenser mic. The key point to remember with a condenser mic is that they require phantom power, typically plus 48 volts, in order to function. If phantom power is not enabled on the channel it's plugged into, the mic will not work. When troubleshooting a dead condenser mic, 90% of the time, someone has forgotten to turn on phantom power. Condenser mics are more sensitive than dynamic mics. They generally have a wider frequency range than a dynamic mic, especially in the high end. Condenser mics don't handle high sound pressure levels as well, like those from, say, a kick or a snare drum. But some condensers are equipped with a pad switch that gives you the option to attenuate, which means to turn down the signal, making them more functional with high sound pressure levels. Condenser mics are often used on hi-hats, cymbals, light percussions like shakers, piano, strings, choir, or ambient room mics. This should be done with a bit of caution, however, as condenser mics on a loud soundstage can create problems if not managed properly. Whether you're using a dynamic mic or a condenser mic on a vocal or instrument, it's important to set a healthy preamp gain. Depending on which mixer you're using, the preamp gain could also be called trim or head amp. The preamp gain is the first in the gain stage when the signal hits the mixer. Where you set your preamp gain affects everything that happens to a signal after this point, which is why it's so important to set a proper preamp gain or trim level. When setting the preamp gain, faders should be down. I highly suggest keeping the channel muted as well if you're working with a scene that already has monitor assignments. We'll use the channel meters to monitor and set the preamp gain level. Let's start with a microphone. We connect the microphone to the mixer and ask the performer to sing or play as they will during the performance. As we increase the trim setting, we will begin to see the signal from the microphone increase on the channel's level meter. We're not going to hear anything yet because the faders are down. I find it helpful to let the artist know that they won't hear anything for a few seconds while I'm setting their preamp gain. Let's keep increasing that gain level until we see the peak levels in the signal begin to clip the channel. You will know when you start to clip because the meter will light up red. This means the channel has been overdriven to the point of distortion. As soon as we see this, we're going to bring the gain back down until clipping stops. Theoretically, the gain for this input should now be properly set. However, in the excitement of the performance, it's likely that the performer will be singing or playing louder than anything they did during sound check. Therefore, we're actually going to take the input trim down a bit more, say somewhere between 3 dB and 12 dB. Think of this as an extra cushion to protect the system from unexpected spikes in the signal level. For instance, a drummer laying down a rim shot way louder than anything he delivered during sound check. Ideally, what we want is for the channel peaks to be hitting into the yellow. Occasional brief clipping incidents when a performer becomes overly enthusiastic won't ruin the show, but overall, you should avoid clipping, while still allowing the signal peaks to get into that yellow area. For now, our first channel should be set. You will repeat this process on all the preamps for the channels you will be using. Now let's talk about microphone polar patterns. Every microphone has a polar pattern. This can also be called a pickup pattern. It's important to understand which polar pattern or pickup pattern our microphones are using. So what is a polar pattern and why do we need to know this? The term polar pattern describes how a microphone picks up sound. More specifically, it describes how sensitive the microphone is to sound waves coming in from different directions. There are 6 main polar patterns, and I'm going to cover the 4 patterns you will most likely encounter on a live sound stage. The first polar pattern is omnidirectional. This mic pattern picks up sound in a 360-degree sphere around the microphone capsule, all directions equally. While this pattern can be useful in some live sound applications, be careful. Omnidirectional mics can be very susceptible to feedback because they pick up sound from all directions, front, back, up, down. In a live sound situation, omnidirectional mics work best when placed in close proximity to their sound source. The next polar pattern is cardioid. This pattern looks a bit like a heart, hence the name, cardioid. A cardioid mic pattern is perhaps the most common pattern found in live sound, especially for vocal mic applications. It features a coverage pattern that picks up sound present in front of the microphone capsule, but rejects most of the sound coming from the back. This is very effective for reducing feedback potential when using a microphone with a stage monitor pointed up towards the singer. These next 2 polar patterns are worth mentioning together because they look very much alike. They are supercardioid and hypercardioid. The supercardioid pattern is very similar to a cardioid pattern, but features a narrower pickup pattern in front of the microphone, rejecting more sound from the sides of the mic. However, there is a larger lobe in the back of the mic that can be slightly more susceptible to sound coming directly from behind the mic. A hypercardioid mic will have an even narrower coverage pattern than the supercardioid. Shotgun mics often use this type of pattern for the enhanced directional control that can be achieved when aiming the mic at a specific sound source. This can be super advantageous for a vocalist until they move off to the side of the mic. At that point, their vocal will all but disappear. There is also a slightly larger rear lobe that will pick up sound from behind the mic. So here's one reason why it's important to know which polar pattern your mics have. This diagram shows the most advantageous monitor placement for cardioid, supercardioid, and hypercardioid mics. On the left, the monitor placement for a cardioid mic is directly behind the microphone so that the sound from the monitor is pointing at the maximum rejection point for that polar pattern. The image on the right shows the most advantageous monitor placement for super and hypercardioid mics at approximately this angle, which is the maximum point of rejection for these 2 types of polar patterns. Pointing monitors at the maximum rejection point of a mic allows us the most gain before feedback is possible. So yes, it's important to know the polar patterns of your mics. These specs can easily be found on the manufacturer's website. Okay, feedback. Let's talk a bit about that. In every movie I've ever seen, when someone steps up to a microphone, the first thing I hear is feedback. Have you ever noticed that? It's totally annoying because feedback is not a good thing. Especially in the house of worship setting. There is nothing more distracting in a church service than when the system starts sailing into feedback. So the big question is, how can we stop feedback? Let's first understand why and how it happens. Feedback is the result of sound looping between an audio input and an audio output. In the case of most live sound systems, feedback is caused by the sound present at a microphone being amplified through the loudspeakers, then returning to that same microphone and being amplified again. When left unchecked, this loop becomes perpetual and causes that distinct screech or howl through the sound system as the exact same audio signal is being reinforced over and over again. A feedback loop starts when the reinforced sound from the loudspeakers becomes louder than the audio source present at the microphone. A singing voice, for instance. There are several things we can do to minimize feedback. Proper placement of microphones relative to the location of the loudspeakers is the first step to reducing the chance of feedback. The main loudspeakers should be placed out in front of the platform, stage, or presentation area as shown in the diagram to the right. This will at least give you a better chance of keeping the majority of the reinforced audio pointed away from the microphones. They should not be placed behind the microphones as shown in the diagram to the left. Okay, so here's another concept that will reduce the opportunity for feedback. Let's have a quick little discussion about signal-to-noise ratio. The signal is the source that you want to amplify in a specific channel. For example, a vocal or an instrument like acoustic piano, guitar, etc. Noise is any other audio content that you don't intend to amplify. For example, loud guitar amps or drums bleeding into the vocal microphones or piano mics. We want a strong signal and as little noise as possible in our microphones. The louder the signal and the quieter the noise, the better signal-to-noise ratio and the least opportunity for feedback. An excellent signal-to-noise ratio helps create a clear and defined sounding mix. And FYI, to the microphone, the audio content from the loudspeakers, whether they're monitors or mains, is noise. So make sure your signal is louder than your noise. This means that vocalists need to sing in close proximity to their mics. Vocalists that sing off their mics are allowing a lot of uninvited noise into their mics. For instruments, set your microphones in close proximity to your intended sound source. If you have an acoustic piano on a loud soundstage, you may need to close the lid and/or move it away from your drums and any loud stage amps if possible. Use sound blankets on top of the piano to help minimize noise bleed in your piano mics. You might consider using baffles on loud guitar amps to control noise bleed in the surrounding mics. You might consider a drum shield to help control and minimize bleed into surrounding microphones. I could spend hours talking about the best practices for miking technique, and at the end of the session, I will provide you with resources for further education. For this training session, however, I want to focus on miking techniques for sources that seem to be problematic for many church sound people. First, let's talk about how to properly mic a choir. Whether you use one mic or multiple mics for the choir, you'll first need to position and aim the microphone. Use the 2 feet by 2 feet rule to help with this. Position the microphone 2 feet in front of the first row and 2 feet above the tallest person in the back, then aim the mic down towards the center row of the choir. When multiple overhead microphones are used to mic a choir, as is often the case, you need to use a basic rule when placing them so that there is limited interference among the mics. The basic formula for properly miking a choir or any group with multiple mics is the 3-to-1 rule, as shown in the diagram to the right. Let's say mic 1 is positioned 3 feet from the nearest choir member. Mic 2 should then be placed 9 feet from mic 1's location. As put in more mathematical terms, a second microphone should be placed 3 times the distance from the first microphone as the first microphone distance is from the sound source. So why do we want to implement the 3-to-1 rule? Well, if multiple microphones are placed too close together, as shown in the diagram to the left, there will be interference between the two different mixed audio signals. This interference results from the difference in timing and phase of the audio signals being mixed together. You may hear a warping effect. The technical term for this is comb filtering. Mixing monitors for the choir can be a challenge as well. It's important to consider monitor speaker locations relative to mic placement and physical choir positioning. You'll want to limit the overall volume of the mix in the choir monitors so that the choir mics pick up more choir and less monitor content. Remember the signal-to-noise ratio that we talked about? Oh, and this is important. Super important here, never mix choir mic channels into the choir monitors. This is a sure way to cause feedback. Another important aspect of mixing for the choir is having them present in the main mix, but not overbearing. Listen to the way the choir sounds in the room without reinforcement. Smaller rooms or more acoustically live environments may require much less choir reinforcement than you might initially suspect. I always find it helpful to mute and unmute the choir mics while the choir is singing during sound check so I can hear the difference between their natural volume level in the room and what they sound like through the loudspeakers. Now, what if you have a contemporary choir with a praise band producing high sound pressure levels from the stage monitors and amps? In my experience, traditional choir miking techniques fail to reinforce the actual choir when combined with a loud contemporary praise band in close proximity to the choir. My choir mics were picking up more stage and monitor volume than choir. Well, here's a solution. In addition to your overhead choir microphones, use several dynamic cardioid microphones dispersed throughout the choir. You can individually mic your strongest vocalists, splitting them evenly between the various harmony parts. In some cases, I've had as many as 24 dynamic mics in the choir, although a choral group sound can be achieved with as few as 8. Another technique for a loud soundstage is one that we used when I went on tour as a vocalist with the Continental Singers. We had 2 people, each sharing a dynamic microphone. If you don't have enough channels on your primary mixing console to accommodate the extra microphones, they can be submixed on an additional mixer, sending only 1 or 2 channels of mixed vocals to the house. The front-of-house sound person can then blend the overhead choir mics with the submixed dynamic mics, giving them the control they need to balance the choir with the loud praise band. Let's talk about miking acoustic pianos for live sound. I've had quite a few church sound people ask me about this. The truth is there's no single correct way to mic up a piano. There are a variety of techniques to capture this instrument, but I'm going to cover the few that I have found to be the most effective. Let's start with miking a grand piano. Probably the most popular microphone technique for grand piano involves positioning a pair of small diaphragm omnidirectional condenser mics directly over the strings just past the hammers as illustrated by the red circles. The gray bar represents the hammers. Place the microphones 6 to 9 inches above the strings and about 18 to 27 inches apart. With the lid open, they may be pointed a bit more downward. On a louder soundstage environment, you'll want to close the lid, so your mics will be placed at an angle like this. This is a picture of a live band recording session I did at the home of 10-time Grammy Award winner Arturo Sandoval. While these omnidirectional condenser mics sound beautiful and natural on a grand piano, there are 2 things that sound people struggle with when using these on a loud soundstage. Number 1, achieving a strong signal-to-noise ratio in order to push the piano into the mix. And number 2, it's very difficult to achieve much gain before feedback when musicians ask for level in their monitors. So I was mixing for an event that had a full band with loud amps and a large choir and a grand piano all crammed close together on stage. And even with the lid down, the bleed from the stage monitors and amps into the piano condenser mics were tremendous. And I just couldn't seem to get the piano to sit in the mix. So here's the solution that I applied. I simply placed one dynamic mic over one of the holes of the piano soundboard. It worked like a charm. The bleed into the mic was dramatically less, and I was able to feed the musicians what they needed into their stage monitors. Though not always quite as natural sounding as my pair of condenser mics, it gave me the control I needed to accomplish the overall mix. Okay, so now let's go back to my pair of condensers. I prefer to use condenser mics on my grand pianos whenever possible because they sound wonderful. But when musicians ask for piano in their monitors, it's difficult to get much gain before feedback with those condenser mics. So in addition to my pair of condensers, I'll set up a dynamic mic in the sound hole. I'll keep it unassigned from the house and use it only to feed the monitors. This way I can give the musicians exactly what they need in their monitors without sacrificing the natural beauty from the condensers in the house. Okay, how about miking upright pianos? A single small diaphragm cardioid condenser microphone pointing straight down in the red position at the lid height will capture the brilliance of the treble strings and the attack of the hammers as they hit the strings. Alternatively, in the green position, the mic will capture more bass. I've achieved my best results by using a combination of the two. Although you can mic an upright piano with only a single microphone over the top, using a pair of microphones spread out over the top produces a balanced tone that's similar to that of a grand piano. And now for the number one concern that trumps all other live sound reinforcement needs for houses of worship around the world: the spoken word. Because it's why we have gathered in the first place, to hear the Word of God and listen to sound teaching. We want to deliver a clear, quality sound from the spoken word. Perhaps the most popular mic for a pastor is the clip-on lavalier mic, or lapel, often part of a wireless microphone system. The lapel mics that come with these wireless systems are often omnidirectional, but you can find these microphones in a variety of coverage patterns, much like any other microphone. Omnidirectional lavs are a good choice for recording, but probably not a good choice for live sound reinforcement if used in a small room or an area where, say, the presenter is near the main loudspeakers. This can be a primary source of feedback. It's best if one uses a cardioid or supercardioid lavalier for most live sound applications. The key to getting a great sound into the microphone and eliminating as much feedback potential as possible is to position the microphone high on the chest of the individual speaking. Place the mic too low below the sternum and you risk picking up too much background noise. But if you place the mic too high near the throat, you'll get low, muffled tones and a lack of intelligibility. It's also important to avoid any areas where clothing or jewelry may come into contact with the mic, causing a rustling or muffled noise. The sweet spot for most lavalier mics is about halfway down the sternum, or 8 to 10 inches from the chin. All right, let's look at headset microphones. These microphones have gotten smaller and smaller over the years to the point where it can be hard to tell if the person even has a mic on at all. It's important that this microphone be placed near the corner of the mouth, but not in front of the mouth. This helps eliminate plosives and breath noise. Some microphones may be designed to rest higher on the cheek, but the general rule of thumb is that the closer the microphone capsule is to the source, the better the sound reinforcement quality will be. Headset mics come in two models, double over the ear and single over the ear. The double over-the-ear headsets are best for keeping that microphone capsule in the exact right placement at all times. But they are a bit cumbersome, which is why many still prefer to use a single over-the-ear headset. Now, keeping that single over-the-ear headset in good placement can be a challenge, especially when there are different users wearing them on a regular basis. The mic may start with good placement and then slowly fall until the capsule is hanging underneath the chin, resulting in a lack of vocal clarity. The sound person may then try to turn up the mic, which can then cause feedback. So, try this simple hack to keep a single over-the-ear headset in its proper placement. Place a small piece of transparent surgical tape at the beginning of the boom in front of the ear and a piece behind the ear on the wire. It works like a charm. These microphones are probably best suited for minimizing feedback and providing the most natural speaking tones simply because they are positioned so close to the sound source. The mouth. While these microphones are also more expensive than other handheld or lapel mics, they are worth their weight in gold if they allow you better sound quality and fewer feedback problems or other audio distractions. All right, now let's look at pulpit microphones. If the pastor or speaker is presenting from a stationary lectern or pulpit, then the use of a fixed gooseneck microphone or stand-mounted vocal mic may be the best option. Of course, it's important to ensure that your sound levels are consistent as the speaker is moving behind the pulpit. For this reason, cardioid pattern microphones are often used. Audix and Shure make great gooseneck microphones for this lectern pulpit mic application. A general purpose vocal mic like the Shure SM58 or 57 can be used in some cases. In fact, the President of the United States often uses two Shure SM57s with widescreens mounted to the lectern. There are so many miking techniques and audio education to cover that I couldn't fit into this teaching session, so I want to refer you to my church audio training group on Facebook. It's called Church Sound Training, and I created this group for church sound people and their volunteers, but the audio concepts that are taught here are universal and applicable across the board. Thousands are benefiting from this information, and I invite you to join the group and expand your audio knowledge. That's the Church Sound Training Group on Facebook. Another excellent audio training resource that you'll want to take advantage of is QSC's House of Worship audio training series. In this comprehensive modular online training course, you'll learn the basics of audio engineering for houses of worship. We cover everything from properly rolling a cable and setting up a PA system to building monitor mixes and running sound for your service. And the best thing is, it's absolutely free. There is no cost involved. This course is AVIXA accredited. You'll earn 4 units upon successful completion of all the online lessons and quizzes. You'll find that at qsc.com. Again, that's qsc.com. I hope this audio training session has been helpful. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Golden Presciado, and just a quick word of encouragement: strive for excellence. Never stop learning, and be the best that you can be. God bless, and bye for now.
Thanks, Golden. I have some outstanding information. The videos were also very helpful. If you have any questions, you can send them to me at glatz@worshipfacility.com, and we'll get you some answers. Thank you for watching this webinar, and thank you, Golden Presciado. I'm Gene Lass, editor of Worship Facility.